Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Now, because loads of people have asked, I'm making an updated 2026 graphics settings video for iRacing. Now, this is what I run. I'm not saying this is the best. This is what I run, which enables me to run triple 4K screens with decent frame rates. Now, I've just had a substantial upgrade from channel partner PC Specialist, and I should tell you the system I'm running now, which might put everything into context, but I'm running an AMD Ryzen 9 9950X 3D2 chip. That's on an Asus TUF Gaming B850 motherboard, 64 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 RAM running at 6000 mega transfers, and an RTX 5090 Founders Edition. So I know I'm very lucky to be able to run the settings that I do, but I've had quite a lot of comments, people saying that I'm also on a 5090 and I can't get those frame rates with triple 4K. So I'm going to show you what settings I have within Windows, within the Nvidia control panel, and within iRacing. There's a couple of other things in this video, what I do differently when I'm capturing replay footage, B-roll, screenshots, and what I would do if I was trying to find a few more frames. So without further ado, let's jump on that system and I'll show you the settings. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at my Windows settings. So we'll right click the desktop, click display settings. Now you can see there, my left screen, center screen, right screen. Now center screen there, you can see 1 and 4. The fourth monitor is my Elgato capture card. And you can see there, I'm duplicating my main screen onto the capture card, which is connected to the other computer. So yours might just say 1, 2, and 3. So you can see there that we're running 4K resolution. We'll click on advanced display. You can see there 3840 by 2160, 240 Hertz. These are the monitors that I'm using. 240 Hertz on all three of them. However, the capture card is running at 120 Hertz, but I cap my frames at 120 Hertz anyway, because I'm working in multiples of 60. That means that I get the smoothest recordings possible. So we'll click back on display and we're going to go down to graphics. And on here, I have optimization for windowed games on, and I have hardware accelerated GPU scheduling on. Now I'll move over to the left-hand side there to where it says gaming. Now some people have game mode on, some people have it off. I have it on. Now we'll close that and we'll go to the Nvidia settings. Now right click again, click show more options, and it will either say Nvidia control panel or Nvidia app, depending on what software that you're running. All the settings are the same, they're just found in slightly different places. So we'll click that. And on the left, you can see system. And we can see here just what we could see in the Windows display settings. Now, I don't have G-Sync enabled because I use overlays. And if you have any overlays on screen, then it disables G-Sync. So you're better off just turning it off within the Nvidia control panel. Now, down to color, I have mine set to default. You can make changes because you'll see on here the color space is different. See, one says RGB there, one says 422, and that's 422 as well. So I could go into the Nvidia settings and set them all to 422, but RGB is better. That's equivalent of 444, but that's just on my left-hand screen anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I would always recommend just leaving this at default. Now we'll go up to graphics. Now I haven't really made any changes in here at all. We'll go to global settings. Now the only changes I've made here are, you can see there, fixed refresh. That automatically changes when we disable G-Sync, and shader cache. Now by default this is off. I have mine set to on. But bear in mind, this eats into your hard disk space. It compiles shaders so you don't have any kind of micro stutters in the game. So I have mine set to on and have it set to medium. And you can see there, vertical sync, use 3D app setting. I always leave it on there and then I decide what I'm going to do when I'm in whatever game I'm playing. But on iRacing, which we're going to jump into, I don't use VSync. Right, so we'll load up iRacing now and I'll show you the settings. Right, so we're in iRacing now. We'll click settings. I'll show you my display as it is right now. So we're running 11520 by 2160, no resolution scaling. And with the numbers I've put in, we've got a field of view of 161. So we'll click on graphics. Now, my graphics settings when I'm racing are different to the ones that I use in the replay. Not only this replay when I'm on triples, but when I'm recording B-roll or capturing thumbnails, that kind of thing, I have a different config file that I load specifically for that. So these are my settings right now. So sky and clouds, I've got them set to medium. But in fairness, you could set them to low because you can't really notice that when you're driving. So car set to high, I want all the detail on the car. Pit objects, low. I'm not interested in the pits when I'm racing. Event high, grandstands high, crowds low. I always have them on low. I don't care what the back of the person looks like when I'm racing. Objects on high and foliage off. I've got 2-pass trees and high quality trees on. Steering wheel static. I normally have this off, but it's set to static because the last car I was driving was the Super Formula Light. And I have all the obstructions hidden. I don't have any cockpit mirrors on because I'm using the virtual mirror. I don't have higher details in mirror. I don't have headlights on track in the mirrors. But obviously the virtual mirror is on and I have the field of view set to 60. Scroll down a bit more now. So maximum cars set to 71. I think that used to be 64, I think it was, or 63. They've upped it to 71. Now this number is how many cars the simulator could potentially draw. So you can see there, this number, we have that set to 20 and 8. 20 being the number of cars that we can actually see through our windscreen, 8 being the number of cars that we can actually see in the mirror. Pits, that's how many cars it will draw in the pits, 20 in the pits out of the windscreen, 8 in the mirror. Now, if we set this to all, it would draw, if you had 71 cars on track, for example, it would draw all of those. Massive hit on your system. So I have mine set to 20 and 8. In reality, you're never going to see more than 20 cars on track when you're driving. Dynamic level of detail, I have that set to 60, only decrease. I think that is the default. Shader quality to max. You could set that to high if you wanted to. I have mine on max and HDR on. Now, that is a big thing for me, the HDR. If I don't have HDR on, I think iRacing looks a little bit flat. Scroll down a bit more. Particle details high, full resolution on. Now, this next section is what makes iRacing look a little bit prettier. It's all about the shadows. So shadow maps on, object self-shadowing on, dynamic objects on. Now, dynamic objects, they're the kind of shadows that you can see when you're driving, you know, from the other cars that they cast on the track. If you don't have that on, I think it looks rubbish, but I don't have it on in the mirrors, don't need it on. Night shadow maps on, shadow map filter PCF 4. Now scroll down a bit more. Motion blur, that's a big hit on your system. I have that turned off. I don't have sharpening on. I might experiment with sharpening just to see what it looks like. I've never been a big fan, but I might try it and have a look. Screen space ambient occlusion, that's a frame rate killer. I have that off. Distortion off. Heat haze off. And down here, anti-aliasing, I have mine set to 2x because I'm in 4K. When I was running 1440, I had that set to 4 and I have the filter at soft. Now, I limit my frame rate to 120 so I get the best recording possible. But I've also noticed that it's smoother. If I cap my frame rate below my monitor's refresh rate, it's just smoother. So try that. G-Sync off, but cap your frame rate. And I have Nvidia Reflex enabled. Now you can see my replay settings are slightly different. I have certain things higher than I do when I'm racing, but I don't use these replays or this file when I'm actually capturing B-roll, getting screenshots, etc. I use a different config file. Now I've created a folder, just stuck it in my documents, iRacing graphics, 2 other folders in there, one for single 4K, one for triple 4K. So all we're doing is we're going to copy these files. You probably only need the renderer DX11 monitor, but I want all of the camera views, etc. to be the same. So we're going to copy those. We're going to go into the iRacing folder and we're just going to paste them into there. We'll ask you if you want to replace them. Say yes. And then we'll jump in the sim and I'll show you the difference. So back in the simulator with my replay config file. So we'll go to settings. I'll show you the resolution. So we're just at 4K, one screen. Click on graphics. And now if we look at the replays, you can see pretty much everything is set to high. Now there's a couple of reasons why I do this. Obviously, the main reason is I want it to look as good as it possibly can for when I'm capturing B-roll, TV cameras, thumbnails, all that kind of stuff. But there's another reason. So if we click on the gyro cam, and this is what it looks like when you have it set to a single screen, you get a really good view out of the cockpit. But this is what it looks like if I capture the gyro cam using triple screen. The perspective is just way off. And it's the same for any other camera. If you wanted to use like one of the suspension cameras, the perspective looks different when you're using a single screen to how it looks when you're recording the single screen from the triples. So if I wanted to free up some frames, this is probably the way I would do it. So we'll go to graphics. So sky and clouds, I would have that on low. Like I mentioned, you don't need that any higher. I would have the cars on high, pit objects on low. I would leave event on high. I would put the grandstands on low. I wouldn't go full esports mode and turn Daytona into a track that you've never ever seen in your life by removing all the grandstands. I would always have the grandstands on. Crowds low. I would leave objects on high. Foliage off. 2-pass trees off. High quality trees off. Steering wheel off. Hide the obstructions. Headlight details on medium. Now, the virtual mirror, by lowering the field of view in the virtual mirror, that actually does give you a little bit more performance because it doesn't have to draw as much. So not only does 60 degrees look more realistic, it's not as intensive on the computer. Scroll down a bit more. Draw cars, 20 and 8. You can go a little bit lower, but not much, 24. Now, the max cars, this is the amount of cars that iRacing could potentially draw. It doesn't draw them all. This is how many you see, but this is how many it can potentially draw. So we could actually reduce that down to 20 or so, and that would improve performance a little bit. Level of detail, I would leave that as it is. Shader quality, you can drop that down to high. HDR, yeah, you can turn that off. You do gain some performance by turning it off, but it's one of those things for me that I really like the nice lighting. Particle details, you could lower those if you wanted to. You're not going to notice that much of a difference. But this next section is where all the frames are hidden. It's in the shadows. Now, shadow maps. So turn these off and you won't have any shadows from the clouds. It just looks a bit naff. Object self-shadowing. They're like grandstands, all that kind of stuff. They cast shadows. Dynamic objects. These are the shadows that are cast by cars that you can see. So if you're looking out of your windscreen, you can see the shadows that are being cast by the cars in front. Again, that's one of those settings that makes or breaks iRacing visuals wise. If I have that off, I think it looks horrendous. But you can have it on main view, which is what I have. Main view and mirrors is just overkill, but you can turn that off if you're struggling with performance. And leave night shadow maps on. Make sure motion blur is turned off. Make sure all of these are turned off. Now, anti-aliasing. Again, that's another one that you can gain a few frames if you lower that. Depends how it looks. Sometimes the jaggies are a little bit too much and you might just have to suck it up and deal with it. But if you can, drop that down. So that's my settings for 2026. Now, there's one thing I didn't mention, which is actually very important and can fix a lot of problems. If you are having performance issues that you never used to have, just run the graphics config again in iRacing. I know you're going to have to set up your monitors again and all that kind of stuff, but there's a good chance that you're going to get lots of performance back that you've somehow lost. I did that exact same thing on the rig over to my right about 3 weeks ago. Performance was terrible. Ran the graphics config once again. Performance came back. So that system is running a 3090. It was really struggling to run triple 1440. Ran the graphics config again. Performance came back. Didn't cost a penny. So hopefully this video helps you out in one way or another. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great week. See you later. Cheers.